All right, how about a little vibe check on the Padres as they enter the final month of the season, one in Tampa to wrap up August, and then we are on to the month of September. Todd Strain, Darnay Trip on Friar Podcast, brought to you by NBC7. Friars dropped a couple in St. Louis, including Thursday, as we record this episode Thursday afternoon to wrap up that leg of the road trip in what has been a challenging stretch. Some big series, the Mets series significant, the Cardinals series significant. Now the road trip continues with the Rays. Finally get a day off, a weird Tuesday day off next week. Will be much needed with just one series after another stacked up. What will end up being 18 and 18 days. And so the Grit Squad, as Mike Schilt referenced, having to show up right now for the Padres. So we will discuss kind of the state of the club, where they're at as they enter the month of the season, how everybody's feeling. Obviously, in good position as far as the playoff hunt goes. Chance that some reinforcements will come, some promising signs, but maybe some areas of concern. So we'll kind of touch it all. Todd Strain, Darnay Trip on Friar Podcast. How are you, Todd?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to talk Padres. Digging it.
Very excited. Always a good time to talk Padres, and lots of positive things to talk about. I mean, imagine like where we thought that they might be like 2-3 months ago compared to where they are now. The conversations we're having, very promising, very exciting, and we're now kind of like splitting hairs a little bit when they go like 5-5 for a stretch, drop a couple games in a row because these are things they haven't done. Certainly in the second half, certainly not cause for concern, but a mini slump, I guess maybe you could it's slightly cooled off based on the torrid start to the second half and how they've been playing the last couple months. And so you got to put it into that perspective. But as we know, you can never kind of completely relax until your name is, you got not X is eliminated, right?
Yes,
I'm trying to think when you look at the standings, X, Y, Z, when you've clinched the playoff spot or what have you, until you got one of those letters next to your name. You can't fully relax. But based on how things are looking, there's obviously reason to be optimistic that that's going to come in due time. But certainly there is work to be taken care of first. Thanks to OGs, a sponsor of the On Fire podcast. Thanks to all to OGs for all they've done for the pod, for the NBC7 sports team. Hopefully have another live OGs pod somewhere down the road. Have had a good time with those the last few months, and hopefully we'll have a chance to see you out at one. Great place to watch whatever your sport of choice is. Certainly the Padres, Major League Baseball, but there's a lot more to watch these days, Todd. Summer gets a little slow. It's not like that anymore. We got college football pretty much like on the daily. Certainly got the Aztecs coming up on Saturday if you can't make it to Snapdragon, and then NFL to follow as well. So a great time to be a sports fan. Lots to watch. OG is a great place to do it. Great menu that they're always updating and refreshing. Awesome beer list. So shout out to OGs for all they do for us and the On Friar podcast. Without further ado, the welcome music. It is the On Friar podcast. He is Todd Strain. I am Darnay Trip, joining you on a Thursday afternoon following the Padres lost to the Cardinals in their finale in St. Louis. A 4-gamer on the road. Road trip continues in Tampa on this weekend, beginning on Friday, of course, and then finally back home next week against the Tigers. But it has been a stretch, Todd Strain. Again, as we mentioned, some significant series as far as the playoff implications go, with the Mets rolling right into the Cardinals series. Which results in a couple relatively low-scoring defeats at the hands of St. Louis. Entering the final month of the season, exactly a month, September 29th, the finale against the Diamondbacks. What could be a really exciting last week with visits to the Dodgers and the D-backs in what is still a relatively tight NL West race, although Arizona's got now a bit of a leg up on the Padres. How you feeling about where we're at heading into the final month of the season, just given all that they've been able to do really since, the last couple weeks before the All-Star break? But now, not exactly playing their best baseball of the stretch, certainly of the second half, coming here the last week or so.
Couple takeaways, Darnay. Losing 2 games in a row. Hey, it stinks. It sucks, but it's not that big a deal because they've stacked so many wins. They have a little cushion. This is why you enjoy being a front runner when it comes late in the season, because you have some cushion and you're not playing catch up like they were last season, where they had to basically win every game to get in at this point. So not a big deal. Also, you mentioned the back-to-back 4-game series with the Mets and the Cardinals. Even though they lost the last 2 to St. Louis, they still fared pretty well. You didn't want to go 1-3 in any of those series, because then you're essentially putting maybe the Cardinals and Mets back in a position where they could catch you in the wild card standing. So as we get under 30 games here, you kind of held those teams at bay. And so overall, just fine. I mean, of course, you would have liked to take 3 in St. Louis, but hanging 2 out of 2 doesn't hurt you. And this is a baseball season. It's a long season. And after that amazing hot stretch, you're going to level off a little bit. And last night's game could have gone either way. Today was kind of a dud. So, hey, welcome to Major League Baseball, right?
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. Like, going into these last 2 series against the Mets and against the Cardinals, it was kind of like, don't do anything worse than hold serve. Like, if you
Yeah.
hold serve, you're still in good shape, where they really have to rally now to make a push. And it would have been nice to do to the Mets and to do to the Cardinals what you did to the Nats and the Pirates, where you basically single-handedly
Yeah.
pick them up like the bouncer at the bar and usher them out. Like, okay, your time here is done. Get out of here. You're no longer in the playoff race. They didn't necessarily accomplish that, but they also didn't allow those guys to make up a whole lot of ground, and certainly on the Padres. So you more or less hold serve. You go 4-4 over the course of those 2 series. That's not gonna hurt you, and you're still sitting here, in good shape as far as the playoff standings go, as far as the playoff race goes. You're still in it as far as the division goes. I mean, 4.5 games out. Like, we've seen teams go from further out to win the division.
Yeah.
You've the Diamondbacks now have a game up. Did they lose? They lose
They did
today,
lose.
3-2 to the
Yeah.
Mets. Yeah, because it was a game and a half a little bit earlier today.
I think
So you got
I think that's the first series the D-backs have lost at home going back to June. It's been a while. Yeah. So they've obviously been playing even better baseball than the Padres in the second half, which is saying something.
Yeah, no doubt. So 1.5 up on the Braves, Mets, then 3.5 out, Cubs, 5.5 out,
Yeah.
Cardinals, 6.5 out, Giants, 7 out. Hard to really picture it maybe for those teams outside the Mets, 3.5. But who knows? Like, anything can happen. But you did enough at this point to kind of feel good about where you're at, all things considered. And yeah, like you said, they gave themselves some cushion, and that seemed to be like, that's what was so of I don't know if evasive is the right word, seemed to elude them early in the season, where they're just kind of bouncing between 500 and that sort of thing. When they went on that 12-3 run, towards the end of the first half, and obviously the way they started the second half, it was like finally they got that insurance that they needed, so that you drop a series or 2 here or there, it's not the end of the world. And so there's reason to be encouraged about that. And what do people often say? It's like, you go 500 through 140, 150 games, and it's the 12 or the 22 games beyond that matter. And like, what do you do with those games? And what they've done was, get themselves comfortably over 500, now 16 at this point, where it doesn't feel like life or death with every single series. And it hasn't felt like that in a long time, which is nice,
No.
because I think that was exhausting for everybody, certainly the fan base. I think it was certainly exhausting for Mike Schilt, and having to face the line of questioning about, like, or is your team ever going to get it together? And they have gotten it together. And so that's, there's reason to feel really good about that.
And it feels great leaving St. Louis, so I don't have to watch any more of those games where every player's jersey is just so dark, nasty gray in the top of the first inning. Like, what? How can people even live in St. Louis? That's just gross. Nobody wants to watch that. Just gross,
Yeah.
sweaty, sweaty jerseys, man. But the split in St. Louis, yeah, I go back to that third game. Like Robert Suarez got the first two outs of that ninth inning, and it looked like we were headed for another Padre rally. And then he gave up kind of, I don't want to say cheap hits because any hit in baseball is not cheap, but those were not hard hit balls. So a lot of location on those. So even that loss was a little dicey for the
Hmm.
Padres. That was a game they could have easily won. So even though they've lost two straight, it's not like they're playing bad baseball or not playing like they were in their winning streak. So more reason for optimism, Darnay, if you're a Padre fan.
And as Mike Schultz said afterwards, Grit Squad showed up. Nobody complained. Tough conditions in a variety of manners. And look, they went out, they grinded, they fought, and just because the scoreboard doesn't reflect that necessarily doesn't mean that it wasn't an encouraging performance in some way, shape, or form. Getting into the weeds a little bit, like anything in particular, kind of catch your eye as we stand right now. Like Manny Machado continues to play well. Jackson Merrill continues to play well. Bogarts had a day off Friday. He's been struggling. Jerkson Profar's had a really rough month of August.
Yeah.
Luis Campusano's had a rough month of August. Jake Cronenworth, what appeared to be a bounce back season early on, hasn't necessarily continued to the extent that, we would all like and be hopeful of and for. So look, you're getting some of those kind of highs and lows.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like what has kind of caught your eye, your attention. There's also like the bullpens had to work,
Yeah.
Michael King labored today, not very efficient. Went through what, 4 and change. Dylan
Yeah.
Cease has had a couple abbreviated starts. One was the weather factor in Pittsburgh. Martin Perez, like there's been a few instances where the bullpens really had to pick up the slack. Now, when you're not really getting off days, fortunately, this wasn't a situation where you had to burn like Robert Suarez like you did on Wednesday, but that's because they weren't in position to get the win either. So, yeah, there's, it's certainly not ideal from that standpoint, just in terms of like you got some guys struggling, got some guys playing really well, but you got some guys struggling. The staff, maybe like King had been really good, not a great start.
Yeah.
Dylan Cease has had some clunkers. Like I expected, especially coming off like the no hitter. One of my second half predictions was Dylan Cease to enter into the Cy Young conversation.
Yeah.
That hasn't really um, come to fruition, but they're having to work through some stuff right now.
Yeah, and you bring up some interesting stuff there. Some things that have caught my eye that are a little bit troublesome in the last few weeks is Jerkson Profar has obviously tailed off. He was playing at an all-time, level. He was up perennial all-star level, obviously, if he kept doing what he was doing in the first half. He's never hit like that before in the big league, so that's a natural tail off. But obviously, that's concerning because if Profar doesn't reach those levels, then you're going to need some pickup from some other guys or maybe Tatis to come back in and really rake. Also, the Xander Bogaerts thing is troubling and Cronenworth. So hopefully out of those three guys, one of those guys can pick it up and regain a little bit of the mojo. The thing I like, which still is super key when I think about this team's success or possible success in the postseason, Darnay, is in these late game clutch situations, it's not always Jackson Merrill coming up clutch. They kind of rotate through different guys, whether it's Peralta or Solana. Donovan, the other day, it was Higashioka, his eighth
Hmm.
inning home run. Even though they lost that game, his eighth inning solo shot tied it. So each time, seemingly, this team gets in a clutch late game situation, it's often Merrill, but it's often other guys too, which is a good sign, I think, because you're going to play tight games like that in the postseason. So those are just a few like positives and negatives in the last few weeks that jump out. But also one other thing you brought up was the bullpen, and Schilt did lean on them. And he really said, hey, bullpen, pick. He was aggressively managing to win those games with some early hooks to his starting pitchers. And the bullpen rewarded him with a lot of those new acquisitions pulling their weight, holding the other teams at bay while the Padres put up enough runs to win. So Schilt was aggressive in his managing for those games, which I thought was interesting, being that it's not, I know, late August, but it's not September yet. But that just kind of stressed to me what he thought was some important results against the Mets specifically in that series.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think he has been a little bit more, and we've talked about this a little bit, like not giving guys quite as much, a little bit shorter of a leash,
Yeah.
when there are signs of struggling, or when they're, whether it's getting through the third lineup the third time, or if the matchup necessitates it, like he's not afraid to have the hook. And he does really, like, he doesn't seem like I don't know if any manager is willing to just kind of punt on a game, but he really seems to manage, like, with the knowledge and understanding that every game could be crucial in the long run, and he's going to approach it as such. He's not going to say, "Oh yeah, get me another inning, like whatever blows up, no big deal." Like, the flip side of that is it might tax your bullpen a little bit more, and so there's a bit of a kind of a give or take there. I was just looking at, from a pitching standpoint, Jason Adam, 13 games now with the Padres, 1 earned over 13 innings, at 0.69 ERA. Sean Reynolds has been really good, 0.96 ERA. Brian Hoeing, another guy from that trade deadline pickup, 11 appearances, 16 innings, 1.13 ERA. And then, of course, Tanner Scott, 2.84 ERA over 12 2/3. And so that was kind of the hope that they would firm up those late innings with the bullpen. I guess kind of the one caveat would be, Robert Suarez hasn't been as lights out as he was to start the season. And he started the season incredibly lights out, to the extent that, like, you would expect him to kind of come back down to earth a little bit. Didn't give up a run, earned or otherwise, in the month of April. 1 earned in 12 1/3 in May. Had a 2.25 ERA in June, 2.79 in July, 4.35 to this point in August. So, and of course, he caught the loss Wednesday, against the Cardinals. And so, I do wonder, I think a lot of people are kind of curious, like, from a lineup standpoint, do we see a shuffling of the order with Jake Cronenworth struggling, with Jurickson Profar? I think Profar has been so good that, like, you can imagine him kind of staying in that spot. But Fernando Tatis Jr. appears to be coming back soon. So when Tatis comes back, and I think, I've had people mention to me, like, okay, what about Merrill? At what point do you maybe swap him with Jake Cronenworth? Because Cronenworth has not had a great season and has not had a great, couple months or what have you. Whereas Jackson Merrill, like, since July, has absolutely taken off and seems to handle whatever situation he's in. We've seen him in big spot after big spot. He's delivered. And so I do think that there is something to be said about having, because, like, to the point that you made just a minute ago, like, it could be anyone. And you never know, what part of the order is going to be up, in the 8th, 9th inning in a close game in a big spot. And you've had guys like Hig, had guys like Merrill, Peralta come up in big spots towards the bottom of the order, even Luis Campusano. So there is something to be said for having that depth and having guys throughout that can do damage. So I could see it from that standpoint, but I'm curious, like, what you think, especially with the possibility of Tatis coming back. As Kevin Acee has reported, he's had more kind of live ABs. He's faced more pitching, like, might not have a rehab start. They might just throw him back out there with the Padres as soon as next week. So once that comes, what do you do with the leadoff spot? What do you do with the first couple spots in the order? And when you're starting to shift, does that shift include potentially a Jake Cronenworth and a Jackson Merrill?
Well, I always answer this question from if I was managing the opposing team. If I'm managing the opposing team and Luis Arraez is leading off, Who do I not want batting second? I don't want Fernando Tatis batting second. I would prefer if you put Fernando Tatis Jr. in the 7 hole or the 8th hole. So I would put Fernando Tatis second and then adjust the lineup accordingly. I like Cronenworth in the middle of that lineup because he's a little bit more protected there versus if you drop him to the end of the lineup. And I'm a big fan of lengthening the lineup, making the lineup as challenging for the opposing staff as many times as possible. And I think Merrill gives you that, that at the bottom of the lineup. So I would keep Cronenworth somewhere in that, 5-6 slot where he can be a little bit protected. And I like Merrill. Merrill's just been awesome. I mean, if you're going to tell me you're going to move Merrill higher, I can't argue with that. But I feel like the lineup works with him. There it is, and it's really, really good balance. But you're exactly right. There have been some drop-offs there. It is concerning. But when you bring up the possibility of Fernando Tatis returning, that is just awesome. And as we talked about when the Luis Arraez trade happened, it's not just you're getting a player that's one of the best hitters in baseball. He makes everyone in the lineup better because he lengthens that lineup and he makes every out more challenging for the opposing pitchers for longer. So when you are inserting Fernando Tatis in the lineup, you're doing that same thing. So that's a huge win for the Padres, I think.
Maybe I just hadn't thought about it, but Tatis has hit exclusively second this year.
Yeah.
And I got to think there's been so many seasons with him where you're like, let's see him lead off. Let's see him clean up. Let's move him around because he can be so effective and he provides you so much in those various different spots. Like if he's hitting third or fourth, you got guys on base. Obviously, you've got his power. That's such a main factor. If you throw him out there number one, you're stressing the pitcher right out of the gates. And he can give you kind of that jump start there. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be another interesting thing. I would guess they stick with Arraez, then Arraez, Tatis, Merrill, Machado. It's a pretty filthy 1 through 4.
Yeah.
And you've got the mix, either side of the plate. And so there's something to be said for that. But I could also see, like you said, Cron's probably going to get more pitches to hit if he's sandwiched in between all those guys. What do you do? Do you keep Bogarts fifth? Maybe you move Merrill up there, after Machado. I don't know. But another thing to kind of take into account, and obviously and Ha-seong Kim at some point, like what do you do with all these guys when you kind of get back to full strength?
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting because essentially what's going to happen in the next few weeks is the Padres are going to have another trade deadline. Basically, it's essentially like they're going out and all of a sudden they're going to be trading for Darvish, they're going to be trading for Tatis, and they're going to be trading for Kim. So you're injecting 3 key players in the lineup who have missed significant time. Darvish now nearly 3 months, Tatis a huge amount of time, and then Kim the last few weeks. So you're essentially having a second trade deadline, which is crazy when you think about you're having a second trade deadline and an injection of talent into basically the team that's had the second best post All-Star break record in the Major League Baseball. So that's just wild to me, and it should be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people were like, all right, AJ, don't go nuts this trade deadline because, you should get some reinforcements. And Joe has been mostly, good, really good since he's been back. And you hope the same from Darvish and you hope the same from Tatis. And so you're absolutely right. It's like another kind of jolt for this team when you get into September, when you're trying to kind of make a last push, whether it be for the division, whether it be just to kind of lock up a wild card spot or to get past the Diamondbacks and to get home field for that wild card series. It's huge. And, you just hope that when his time comes, and Schultz said that he'll have 4 innings in Arizona, live 4 innings, at some point. I don't know if he said specifically what day. So obviously progress for you since his return. And so hopefully you see him back and hopefully he's able to, it's asking a lot given how long he's been away and just, knowing that he's been doing some work on his own, but just the extent of it and what that has necessarily looked like. But hopefully can, replicate to some degree what Joe has done and Fernando Tatis Jr., who has generally been pretty good coming off of long absences. Unfortunately, he's had to do that a lot through his career, coming off injuries, coming off absences. And, the fact that this isn't, fact that it's a leg and not a shoulder or a back or that sort of thing, like, hopefully from like a timing in the upper half with his swing and that sort of thing, it doesn't cause him, too many issues as he's making his way back. But, either way, that's a huge boost. But at the same time, David Peralta's got like a 900 plus OPS in the month of August, and he's been really, really good and come up in big spots. And so, yeah, I don't know if you bring Fernando Tatis Jr. back and he's not playing every single day, but at least gives you the option, or maybe if it's DH day for Peralta here or there, it's like you don't necessarily want to get rid of that bat because he's been a really impactful guy for you.
That's the rub, right? I mean, you're not going to activate Fernando Tatis and not play him. You just hope that by bringing him back, you're able to put Peralta enough times into the lineup where he can continue to make consistent contributions like he is now as an everyday player. One thing I want to circle back to that I thought was really interesting, Darnay, that you brought up is the bullpen usage and Schilt going and getting those guys. And I thought about last year where there was a disconnect in the organization between Bob Melvin and AJ Preller, how they wanted to use everyone, right? So even though Schilt is going to his bullpen a lot and taxing his bullpen, AJ Preller went and got all these relievers at the deadline, right? He bolstered his bullpen with all these new arms. So there's a fluidity where throughout the organization where Preller is acquiring talent for a position and the manager is then using that talent for the position repeatedly. So they're symbiotic. They're in agreement on how this is going to work. So it's an organizational approach to go get certain players. And then the manager is essentially saying, yes, I want to use these players and I'm going to use them a lot rather than relying on the starting pitchers. So that's kind of what Padre fans wanted, right? An organizational fluidity, no disagreements, and to have the consistent approach with the front office down to the field. So I think that's great to see. You can argue like, hey, he should have stuck with the starter more, or he's taxing his bullpen that. But it's a consistent approach, which hopefully will bode really well as we enter these key stretch of games and then the postseason. And it's something that wasn't there last year, Darnay.
Yeah, it's a great point. Jason chiming in, pretty hot and miserable for the series in St. Louis. Not concerned with the split because you and Tatis Jr. will ignite the team when they get back. No doubt. Yeah, and certainly nothing to sound any alarms about. No. Yeah, it was all in all. When you factor everything in, we factor in kind of the teams that you're playing, what's on the line, being on the road, tough conditions, you can't be mad at it at all. And look, I mean, like teams aren't going to sustain the type of stretch that the Padres had been on if we're kind of moaning and complaining about them going 5-5 and dropping a couple in St. Louis against, at least on a team that's on the periphery of the playoff competition.
That's a sorry Cardinals team, man. Those were some sorry games.
And a sorry showing from the best fans in baseball, too. I mean, I joked that, like, hey, are they going to give Jackson Merrill a standing ovation like they did Paul Skeens? And everybody's like, well, who would? Nobody's there to give a standing ovation. So
it's rough in Busch Stadium these days.
No, I'd say I think we get to interact and be around the best fans in baseball more, certainly compared to what they're showing in St. Louis right now. I mean, what you see at Petco puts them to shame.
Yeah. Hey, Darnay, your thoughts on
real quick. I wanted to get back to what you said because I think you're absolutely right. Two quick thoughts.
Yeah.
You mentioned the playoffs, like how Schilt has been managing his staff is probably more akin to what you're going to see in the playoffs anyways, where you have the quicker hook, where you often see starters only make it through like 4 or 5. And it's not necessarily because they're blowing up, but maybe they give up a hit and a walk. Maybe you're getting around to the second, third time in the order, and it's like, okay, we need a change. So you don't have that long leash that you often see during the regular season. And so maybe that preparation will help in some way, shape, or form because they're kind of used to the way he manages. It is kind of like almost like a playoff style form of managing. And I've thought about one thing a lot that Bob Melvin said last year. It's kind of like a chicken and egg type of thing where he said when they went on the run in September, like everybody was involved and teams play better when everyone's involved.
Mhm.
Now, for much of the season, you were kind of handcuffed by like Nelson Cruz, Matt Carpenter, guys that just weren't doing anything for you. And you didn't have like young guys like Edgar Rosario came up, got involved, that sort of thing. So you saw a little bit of that as the season went on, but they relied so much on like the same group of players, same lineup every day, needed the stars to contribute, wasn't happening, didn't have guys down the line. Whereas this year, like obviously the stars, take out Bogarts, have been really good, especially Machado since like mid-June. Fernando being an all-star, Luis Arraez doing Luis Arraez things, and then you have Merrill becoming a star. But you had Donovan Solano, David Peralta, Kyle Higashioka, Campy for stretches, like Cronenworth for stretches. It's really been like a full team thing. And I think Bob Melvin preached that. I remember in spring trainings, like it's not just the full 25 or 26, it's the full 40. But you didn't necessarily see that. I don't know if that was all on Bob
Yeah.
necessarily, if as opposed to it being kind of a roster construction, but we've really seen that this season, throughout the season, how like everybody steps up, everybody contributes. Even Tyler Wade's had big spots. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think that's a great point by you, kind of about the bullpen, but that really has shown itself like roster wide this season and been a big key to their success. And it's like one thing I want to talk about as the playoffs get closer is like who's going to be the guy that isn't Machado or Tatis
Yeah.
that like has a hot. Remember Trent Grisham, Austin Nola in the Mets series,
Oh,
guys
I
you wouldn't
remember
necessarily
Trent
think of.
Grisham, the good and the bad.
Jerks and Profar, like guys stepping up
Yeah.
and having huge moments, huge series, like is going to be a Tyler Wade, like bunting and stealing a base and setting himself up to score a run. Is going to be Donovan Solano, like in a key spot. There are a lot of guys that you feel like that you're confident in those situations,
Mhm.
or you could feel like have like a really good week or 3 games or 5 games or 7 games that tip the scale in a series like that.
Yeah, and sometimes you just catch lightning in a bottle, right? For a season with certain players. Like Solano and Peralta are exceeding what they've done the last few years. Profar's never done anything like this. Higashioka is hitting homers at a much higher rate than he ever did with the Yankees. So as you said, all these things are happening simultaneously to kind of like I just watched Oppenheimer, so the atoms are coming together for mass explosions. I finally got around to it. Yes, so all these things are happening together. So it'll be real interesting to see, as you said, in the postseason, if that keeps happening with some of these guys that are unexpected heroes, if you will.
Yeah. A couple cool things to monitor. I mean, Jackson Merrill now 20 homers.
Mhm.
Vegas seems to indicate that he is now your National League Rookie of the Year. And so the way that that's flipped and like the national hype train has like completely gone in its favor. I had Sports Center on, was it yesterday? I think we had just gotten home from 8 days in Seattle on the Olympic National Park Wilderness. So I've been out of it a little bit, had Sports Center on, and
Yeah,
they had a graphic.
your beard's looking a little unkept, dude. It's looking a little natural.
No, it was
You're a
trimmed. It was
mountain
trimmed
man.
today. I wish. It's the hair. It's the hair. I need a haircut. They showed the betting lines and how it's
Yeah.
changed from Skeens to Merrill, over the course of, I don't know, last couple months since the All-Star break or something like that. And so, 6 o'clock Sports Center is talking about it.
Yeah.
It's getting discussed everywhere. And so that's cool to see, and it's deserved. And he hasn't really slowed down for extended stretches and has put together another really, really good month and came up big against an East Coast team like the Mets.
There you
It's
go.
always nice to have more moments like that. And so that's now it's going to be incumbent on him. And now what happens with Paul Skeens, like how many starts does he get to kind of state his case. But Jackson Merrill's getting more and more moments to kind of cement himself as the National League Rookie of the Year, which is cool.
Yeah, that momentum has been building and building and building for weeks. And of course, here in San Diego, we're very aware of it. And I mean, if you're just watching the Padres every day, you'd be like, a few weeks ago, you probably would have said, hey, he's past Skeens. But then that Sunday walk-off against the New York Mets, you said an East Coast team, and that put him all over ESPN, all their shows, and just the visuals on that and all the records that he set for whether it's tying or go-ahead homers in the 8th inning all time or 9th inning hits. His 9th inning batting average is now over 500 in key situations. Just incredible. So all that just came to the forefront nationally after that walk-off home run. And so, yeah, I think if you've been paying attention to baseball, unless Skeens has an incredible last month, this is Jackson Merrill's award. To lose what he has done has just been incredible. The only thing that's going to prevent him from winning, Darnay, is an Olivia Dunn social media push.
Well, I don't know
if she goes viral with some sort of skiing stuff. Merrill may be in trouble. We'll see.
I don't know if the voters, given what we know about like the age and demographics of the voters, if they're really on social media like that, if they're following Livy Dunn, so that might work in Jackson's favor. If there's a younger crew of voters that they might be swayed by that.
AJ Cassavell might change his vote, but he's a young MLB guy. He's the youngest I've ever seen. Just kidding.
It's true. It's true. I feel pretty good about AJ though. And to update a stat that's made the rounds on social media and when this was starting to build, I had a couple people. One person in particular is like that had mentioned this, and I thought it was kind of a funny stat. And then I saw it blow up the other day. Merrill now has 20 home runs to 18 starts by Paul Skeens. So 18 starts compared to 20 home runs. So yeah, it's been awesome to see. And the way he's just kind of been so steady and consistent, and now he's been in the race and continues to make his argument. And it almost feels like if it ended today, you felt like, okay, he's going to have to continue to make his case to surpass Paul Skeens. Yeah. I don't know if I expected him to kind of surpass him in a sense already, where like Vegas and others are pointing at him. Even when a couple weeks ago when I was on with Derek, Ken Rosenthal said, Jackson Merrill's my rookie of the year. You're seeing it more and more. And, now it's kind of on Merrill to kind of hold it up. But the cool thing is, like, if it ended today, it's probably Jackson Merrill, which as much as I thought like, okay, he's going to be making his case, I don't know if I expected it to kind of turn as quickly as it has.
100%. When it comes to these awards, no matter what the league is, whether it's basketball, hockey, or baseball or anything, stats are obviously first and foremost. But then if your team is competitive and playing for something like a playoff spot or a division championship or something, and you keep being the man in key spots, that should give you the boost over your competition for whatever the award is. And we see Jackson Merrill do that game after game. I mean, without Jackson Merrill, if they had left him in the minor leagues this whole season, the Padres would not be where they are. They would be down battling most likely the Braves and the Mets for this final get-in playoff spot. I mean, Jackson Merrill has single-handedly won them, I don't know what you want to say, 6 to 10 games this season with his play. He's had a lot of clutch moments late. He's had a lot of clutch moments from earlier points in the game that have flipped the game. So he deserves to be rookie of the year, 100%.
Yeah. His WAR now, this on ESPN, I know it's not necessarily 3.5 leads the team.
Wow.
Let's see what Fangraphs has at this point for Jackson Merrill. Oh, where are we here? 4. So kind of in the same neighborhood as well. But, when you factor in what he's done in 8th, 9th innings, that number doesn't necessarily seem to kind of tell the whole story.
And what's really impressive to me, of course, everyone when he hits the home runs, to take the lead or tie the game late, of course, but it's like his at bats, Darnay, and his approach in the 3rd, 4th, 5th innings are consistent. He routinely has great at bats. He doesn't try to do too much. If he hits a walk-off game winner one day, he doesn't come back the next day and swing for the fences. He's happy to take a pitch the other way and just serve it to left field and get on base. And his center field play has been amazing for a guy who just started playing there. So it's all the highlight plays, but even more impressive is when you're his age, 20, 21 years old now, and you get all these accolades and you get all these success to not change your approach for a young kid like that, I think is really impressive. And it bodes well to what could be some magical stuff in the coming years.
I mean, when do you ever see him like swinging out of his shoes, like out of control?
No.
Trying to Matt's feeling your point here. I agree with Todd. Merrill's approach at the plate is solid.
Yeah.
It's really solid. It's like you never see him swinging out of his shoes.
No.
I forget what the situation was. Maybe it was the game where he was flirting with I think he needed a homer for the cycle.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm just, base knock, you know what I mean? Like that's all he was going for. And I feel like he said something along those lines after hitting a homer, like all he's looking for is just to make solid contact put into play. And his swing seems to like what's the word I'm looking for? Like that's just kind of how his swing, like even like the homer on Sunday, it's kind of like a 3/4 finish. You know what I mean? He's got like a compact, simple swing. He's not swinging out of his shoes. He doesn't have like a long finish. It always seems very much in control. And as we've seen as the season has gone on, there's like a lot of power in that compact, controlled swing. But to your point, it also allows him to like have competitive at bats, to stay in it, to make solid contact, and to make contact all over the zone too. So it's been pretty awesome to watch, and just it's super impressive for somebody of his age.
His swing is like his post game interviews: short, powerful,
to the
point.
compelling.
But it's also interesting, Darnay, to watch the opposing players. You kind of see them sensing like, this guy's a guy. Like he's exceeding expectations, and he's now a guy that we have to worry about. Like when I watch the games and I see Merrill like steal a base or get on base, the reaction of the other teams is like, man, this guy is good. And you just get that sense, whether it's on the TV or being at the ballpark, that other teams realize that, hey, Jackson Merrill is a dude to deal with in the coming years.
Yeah, no doubt. Manny Machado also continues to be really good and has been now for like a couple months. Keep waiting for his OPS to creep above 800. I don't think he's there quite yet. But it would be the first time since I'm trying to think. Was his season high? I can't remember early in the season. He was at like 794 at some point in April, and then tough couple months, but has been again like June, July, August. He's been on it, and he's now creeping up in the Padres home run record. He's at 160. Only needs 3 to tie Nate Colbert, 4 to pass him. And hasn't hit any in the last couple games, which is maybe a good thing. Obviously you would have taken the win. That would have contributed to a win. That's one thing. But now got the 3 games in Tampa. He'd mentioned that he wants to do it at Petco Park. And I think fans are kind of selfishly hoping that's the case. Even if you would take one in a big moment here or there to save, not go on a complete tear and have a multi-home run game, and all of a sudden you're breaking the record at the Trop or in St. Louis or something like that, to do it against the Tigers in Detroit, or against Detroit or whoever. I think would be really, really cool, and neat to see a record that's probably needed to go down for a long time, that has had a number of guys flirt with it. Adrian a couple away, Nevin a couple away, Dave Winfield. There's been a handful of guys that have come close and have ended up, with another team. Nevin got traded. Winfield, big deal with the Yankees as a free agent. Adrian moves on as well. And what I did, what I've either forgot or didn't realize is he wanted to come back in 2018, 2019, and would have had a chance to break the record, but sound like AJ Preller and company are like, thanks, but no thanks. We're good here. So we could have seen that record go down. Hasn't happened yet, Manny. Now it's just a matter of time, just 4 away. So that'll be cool to see. It'll be an awesome scene at Petco Park. And now nice to see that record kind of, it's the lowest in all of Major League Baseball for a franchise home run record. The D-backs, it was Luis Gonzalez, like 224 or something like that. So let's boost this number a little bit, because like as it's come up and as people have talked about it, you've heard a lot of people say, well, it's not that impressive, it's only 163. but it is impressive to do it in the manner that Manny Machado has done. Fact is, Tatis, if he had stayed healthy, probably would have done it by now. But it'll be cool to see that finally go down and hopefully go down at Petco Park where it can be celebrated as it deserves.
Yeah, it's just amazing when you think you mentioned the low total for the franchise home run leader. When you think of all the great hitters that the Padres have had and guys with power, like going way back, Winfield, Nettles, you mentioned some, McGriff, Sheffield, all these guys, Vaughn, and it's crazy that Nate Colbert still holds that record, and Manny's going to rip through that, and with 9 more years on his contract, he's gonna blast. He's gonna blast through that. So, and getting back to what we're seeing from Manny, it was rough those first couple months coming back from the offseason elbow surgery. Rough may be an overstatement, but it was un-Manny like. He looks like himself at the plate. His swing looks better. He doesn't appear as visibly frustrated after some at bats where he's like, "I'm better than this."
He's not holding him back anymore.
Yeah, and the plays he's making on defense are just like, you see, he's got the strut when he makes the plays. He's like, I'm back, I'm feeling it. And I think being in the race rejuvenates a guy and raises your level because he has played in some big time games throughout his career. So anytime you end the season, the dog days of August, just playing out the string, that's a bummer. That's a downer. So as the Padres have needed Manny Machado, he has responded in the second half of the season, and he looks more healthy than he does at the beginning, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much daily web gems out of Manny, in that Cardinals series, doing it against, Nolan Arenado and the Cardinals, I think was kind of a fun statement. And, fans could certainly enjoy that because that was kind of, the guy that was, winning Gold Gloves in the competition for the best third baseman. I think Manny as a whole has had a better year. Arenado's numbers have not been great. And, especially when you consider what Manny has done the last 2+ months. And so to do that, to homer, to play as well as he has defensively, was kind of cool. Just, hit 3 homers this weekend against the Rays. That's fine. Just don't hit the 4th, save that for Labor Day, or at some point when Wednesday or Thursday against Detroit. Cause that'd be fun to see. You got the Giants coming in, after that, but, that'll be cool.
So you mentioned the upcoming series in Tampa against the Rays. So I was listening to Padre radio broadcasts. They threw out a couple amazing stats. The last time the Padres played in the Trop against the Rays, played in Tampa, 2017. The last time the Padres won a game in Tampa, 2010. They haven't won there in 14 years. So we're looking at possibly some history this coming series in that terrible, terrible stadium in Tampa Bay.
When was the last time they won a series?
I don't know. The last time they won a game was 2010. I don't know if they won that. I'll have to get out my 2010 media guide and see if they won that series.
Yeah, that's pretty. I hadn't even dawned on me.
I can't even think, like watching baseball through the years. I don't a Padre game in Tampa Bay. That's like,
I know.
I have no visuals for that ever in my memory bank.
And they, I feel like they have played them. I guess it was just always been here, and so it hadn't even dawned on me that it had been that long since they've been to the Trop. But I'm sure they're all, clamoring and excited to go to a historic and scenic baseball venue like the Trop. It's going to be what a highlight this is going to be for Jackson Merrill, young in his career, to play at the Trop. Good for him.
Can we please just get rid of the Rays as a franchise?
No, I think they're getting to
Montreal. Put them in the Montreal Expos old uniforms and make everything right in the world. Can we do that, Major League Baseball?
What I thought the Nats weren't the Nats the Expos?
They were, but the Expos, they deserve to have a team in Montreal.
Yeah.
Those uniforms, those gorgeous light blue, red, white.
I know, those
sweet. Things should be
with the weird
every game.
The weird Montreal Expos baseball logo that kind of makes sense, but doesn't really make sense, but we accept it because it's just an old baseball thing that we like.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. No,
we had the Tampa Bay Rays.
No, I think they're getting a stadium. I think they approved a stadium.
Still,
I might be wrong about that. But anyways,
what are they gonna? They're gonna build the roof like 10 feet higher in the new stadium. They're bozos down there.
So they got 3 in Tampa. Apple TV broadcast on Friday. And then Labor Day against the Tigers, a 3:40 start. Day off on Tuesday, a well-deserved, well-needed day off.
Yeah.
Then 2 more against Detroit, Wednesday and Thursday. And maybe we'll do a late Thursday night pod next week after they wrap up the Tiger series. We'll see what we do there. But we'll be back with you to discuss all things Padres. We'll be in September, final month of the season, entering or approaching the home stretch, those big 2 series to wrap things up. And a lot to like, a lot to be excited about. Where the Padres are heading into the final month of the season, a lot to play for, not just a playoff spot, chance to host some playoff games. It's good stuff. You got a National League Rookie of the Year chase that's on. Got the second deadline additions with Tatis, Darvish, those guys. So things are good. Things are good.
Tuesday, that's a funky off day. And so if you're near a golf course in San Diego, you might see some Major League Baseball players out there, whether it's Padres or Tigers, on an off day after Memorial Day. I would venture to say, bring your pens, papers, go around some golf courses, and you can see some big leaguers.
Somebody will be at Coronado. So I'm just going to say somebody's going to be at Coronado.
Torrey, Medeiros. I'm not going to give any other Coronado. I don't.
Todd, always a pleasure. Great to be back with you. Thank you as always. And we'll catch back up with you next week. Thanks, everybody.